Welcome to another edition of GRC Solutions TV. I'm joined today by Geoffrey Stackhouse. Geoffrey's a Managing Director of Clarity Business Solutions. He joined our panel today to discuss data protection and information security, and Geoffrey's here to share some thoughts with our viewers today. So Geoffrey, we talked about PRISM, how the NSA collects information, after the Edward Snowden event. What angle can the US government use now that they've been exposed for spying on not only their own people but also their allies?
Well, John, the best angle that they can take really is to hope that it gets out of the media cycle, because this is a weeping sore, particularly with Snowden in limbo. He's still in the Russian airport near the side of the border. So until he actually settles somewhere, this story is always going to be coming back into the media cycle. And really, the US government needs for it to go away.
Sure.
That said, they're doing a few things, I think, quite well to manage it. The first thing that struck me was that they've talked about charging him under the Espionage Act. Now, they must have had some legal advice here, some good legal advice. My reading is that's not going to stick. He can't be charged under that. So why have they chosen that? And I'm thinking it's for the dramatic gesture of branding him as a spy, as a traitor, turncoat.
Sure.
So public opinion is shaping around the fact that he's done something quite bad.
Yes.
The other thing that I really like is the one quote from Obama which has made headlines. And it's something like, well, we're not going to scramble fighter jets to bring this guy down.
Yes.
It's a wonderful quote. Before we get into the content of that quote, what it's done is that's the sparkling bit of candy that's drawn all of the media attention. They've got to have that, they've taken it, they've run it everywhere. But what does that make you think and feel? It says, well, it's not such a big deal. The guy's no mastermind criminal. We're just going to let it go. And I think when you look at the way they're handling it, they're doing about as best they can.
Sure. Thank you. Sort of a bit more in our neighbourhood, we talked about the New Zealand Earthquake Commission. They took out an injunction over a privacy breach when an email was inadvertently sent out to a recipient. They handled that in a slightly different way when it hit the media. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Well, I didn't see that when it hit the media, but I went back and had a look at some of the evidence in preparation for the panel today. And I was actually quite impressed with what they did.
Yeah.
So we're talking about really a foolish mistake. What has happened here is that somebody within the commission has emailed a document and they've attached the whole file instead of a small button of information. Accidents can happen.
Yes.
What I think is really important to do when you're in that situation, when you're looking at how it's being interpreted in the court of public opinion, as opposed to the law courts, is to say, why does it matter? And what is driving that is the idea that can we actually trust the commission? Are they generally doing the right thing? Well, not just the 96,000 people in Christchurch, will they be okay? But it's actually all of the people in New Zealand are affected by that organisation. So it really is coming down to, can we trust them? What they did was very clever.
Yep.
They confessed, they came completely clean on what had happened. They brought the Prime Minister in and they had him briefed and ready to give a line. The media actually understood, from my reading of it, that it was a smaller amount of data. And without saying what the actual amount was, they indicated in fact it was worse than that.
Sure.
And then they put a bit of context around the type of data and talked a little bit also around the fact that they have hundreds of thousands of exchanges in 20 years of history. This is the first time it's happened.
Yes.
So they're really setting themselves up to be good people who've made a single mistake, which they've now taken steps to make sure it won't happen again. And what they've done, I think, is protect their reputation and keep people's trust and confidence in the Earthquake Commission.
Sure. And with the recent leak of, a device, I suppose, with information, the Australian Institute of Company Directors had a laptop with lots of company director information on it. Did we see much damage to their brand? Or how did they handle that particular incident?
We didn't see a lot of damage to their brand. And I think partly because they handled it well. And handling it well, they sort of downplayed the news side of it. 66,000 members on their database were taken. Again, if we look at what they did, they were quite upfront about it. They said, this is what has happened. they managed to put some information out there through the media, but also direct to their stakeholders on their website, saying, look, yes, a laptop has been stolen, not a desktop, so it wasn't actually an information theft, it was an opportunistic moment. The laptop's been stolen, there's a triple layer of security on that laptop. If they did manage to get through all of that, they're going to find information which is actually on the public domain anyway.
Sure.
So a little bit of context around that. What would have made it quantumly worse if they had played the blame game?
Yes.
Because it wasn't their fault. Their landlord, the National Australia Bank, I think was doing building works, something like that. There was a security failure. Their front door popped open and some chancer walked in, lifted the laptop. He probably sold it down at the pub for a quick hit a few minutes later.
Yeah.
So if they had then passed the blame, that would have inflamed the whole story, made it worse and dragged on. And in doing that, the allegations about their behaviour and maybe their brand would have been at a lot more risk and stress than it is now.
Sure. So a kind of an inadvertent case of them being vulnerable to that sort of attack. Whereas what we discussed briefly around the BHP Billiton case, they were looking to purchase a potash corporation out of Canada, and there was a Chinese company who were interested, and there was a number of law firms involved. So what we understand, the Chinese hackers actually targeted the law firm. So what kind of communication do you need to get out in the event of a cyber attack of that nature?
Well, it's a really important question because I think with the age of the internet, there are no secrets anymore. So it's not about, the focus shouldn't be on how do I protect my data. Yes, you've got to do that, but you've also got to be thinking, how do I prepare for the inevitable breach?
Yes.
So with the AICD, the last case that you mentioned, they were the innocent victims in this. Now, fortunately with BHP, I think there was actually no successful breach. I think that their data was protected. All you can do in that situation is talk about how you respect data, the safeguards and the layers of protection, the safeguards that you have in place, which will then prove the fact that you respect them, and talk about the fact you're doing everything you can to keep the data safe.
Yeah. And Stephen talked about the layers of protection that you have on your data and the right sort of levels of access, so that ties in quite nicely. And then again, close to home, sort of the privacy commissioners have joined in an international open letter to Google to raise questions from a privacy perspective about the development of Google Glass. So what's the purpose of the open letter?
The open letter, yes.
And then does it get ignored by Google but cover the regulators when they kind of come back to a total defence in about 18-24 months' time?
Well, obviously this will play out over, as you say, a couple of years or many years. And I think Heather made some interesting points around the fact that legislation always has to lag technology.
Yes.
When I looked at that open letter, my first thought was it's just a publicity stunt. Because, yes, they've actually sent the letter to Google anyway. They didn't need to publish it. It did trigger some media coverage, but what was the message that coverage sent? The message was, the privacy commissioners of the world are watching this. We have our eyes on you, and we are united. So it was a very powerful statement in that respect. If they had really wanted to be effective in stopping Google, and of course, look, that horse is bolted. I don't know if you know this, but there's another firm claiming to have a product out, I think 6 months from now, for $300, which is a generation ahead again. We are going to have Google Glasses in the near future. It's going to happen, and they'll be publicly available, cheaply available. If they had wanted to stop that, they would have been better off fighting that in the social media, not the mainstream. They would have been better off targeting the early adopters, the users, which are the younger generation, who live and breathe social media. So, for my money, it was a publicity stunt. It was a strong message, but ultimately an ineffective message.
So what would Google's response to the letter be? How would you advise that they respond?
Well, clearly they would have to respond, but only if they're actually mailed the letter, which is part of the plan as well. You clearly get mailed a letter. The letter itself, if you read the contents, was incredibly abstract. There was very general, as you'd expect. There were 26 different countries involved. There were a number of bureaucrats all having their fingers in the pie. It was a toothless tiger of a letter. So the response would be very simple. If I was talking to Google, I would write directly to each of the people. I would give assurances about Google's policies around respecting privacy, the things that the safeguards we were doing, the actions we were taking to demonstrate that respect.
Yes.
And I just let it die quietly.
Yeah, excellent. Good advice, I think.
Thank you.
Geoffrey, I'd like to thank you very much for joining our panel today, spending a little bit of extra time sharing your thoughts and opinions with our viewers, and thank you very much.